Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Are Your Business Payments Safe? Presented by Paymerang. I'm John Lentz, Editor-in-Chief of NYN Media, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Our partner on this webinar is Paymerang, whose award-winning electronic payable solution provides a simple, secure, and profitable way to pay your vendors, saving clients hundreds of hours each year and reducing the risk of payment fraud. Paymerang processes billions in payments annually for clients from coast to coast in all verticals. It includes over 200,000 suppliers who receive payments electronically. Also note that this is part of a two-part discussion, with the second one coming up on October 22nd. I'm joined today by two Paymerang executives who will be making a presentation on business payments and taking questions throughout. Just note that you can pose questions in the Q&A function, which you click at the bottom of your screen. I'll review those and try to ask as many as I can that we have time for. You can also give a thumbs up to a question you like, help moving it up to the top. Finally, we've been working on a poll function. We'll try to ask some poll questions. Similarly, you can click at the bottom of your screen to vote on the poll, and we'll have some immediate results there if everything works out. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Matthew Kirkpatrick. He's a Vice President of Business Development at Paymerang. He's a former collegiate athlete and coach who enjoys the transferable skills from the world of athletics to business. I believe had a career in college and beyond in soccer. Maybe I'll touch on that later. I'd also like to introduce Jeff Gaynor, Director of Information Security and Risk Management at Paymerang. Jeff has over 20 years of experience in the financial services sector with GE Capital, Genworth Financial, and Impact Makers. He has spent the last 10 years focused on managing operational risks in the areas of data security, business continuity, outsourcing, and fraud. So let's now go to our first poll question. Again, we've been working out the kinks on this, and it may not work for everyone depending on your operating system, but let's give it a go. How do you make your payments today? Let's give that maybe 15, 20 seconds here. And you can select from the four options and then submit. All right, let's see if we can get any results here. There we go. 58%, mostly checks and ACH, some credit card, and far fewer mostly checks or mostly checks, some ACH. A quarter of you said other. I'll leave that to Matthew and Jeff if they want to weigh in on any of that. Then on to the next slide. The agenda today, 3 points we'll be hitting on. The key threats of payment fraud. Secondly, the 4 layers of protection available. And last but not least, practical steps you can take to protect your organization. Matthew, I'll turn over to you to begin the presentation.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone. Before I jump into the presentation, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. I want to reiterate that the goal today for Jeff and I is to provide you with information around fraud as it pertains to your business payments. This is an educational webinar, so you can become more aware of the ever-growing threat out there to your organization. And like John said, please ask questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And I also want to make sure a PDF copy of these slides are emailed to everyone, so you have the presentation for your records, so you can share it internally within your group. So, okay, let's get started. So yeah, fraud is exploding. It's everywhere. And I want to share some recent headlines with you to get things going here and kind of facilitate the discussion. The first one is from the Seattle Times, and it was a recent incident 2 weeks after revelations of a massive fraud scheme that briefly shut down Washington's unemployment system. State officials acknowledged that the scale of the theft was probably between $550 million and $650 million. Or as much as one of every $8 paid in benefits during the pandemic. And of that sum, the state has recovered about $333 million, the State Employment Security Department announced recently. But the efforts to root out the fraud continue to slow, legitimate benefits payments for tens of thousands of out-of-work people in the Seattle area. So it's not chump change. The second example is from Forbes. More than 2,000 victims lost money through fake goods sold online, cold calls, text messages, and other types of fraud, according to the UK agency Action Fraud, which enables people to report if they are victims of a cybercrime or fraud. So one type of cold call that has been reported to Action Fraud is for people who are claiming to help to fix a device or an IT problem, which we all have, right? Other types of fraud have included those people who are most vulnerable and have had to self-isolate, paying for online shopping, and then it just doesn't arrive. So nearly 12,000 people were victims of phishing and smishing scams, which are emails, and this is a really key point here, emails pretending to be from someone else in a bid to get the recipient to send over personal details and or to make a payment. And that's massive right now. And then the third example, the third headline was up in Chester, Pennsylvania. According to the prosecutors, an individual, Georgia's, stole checks from the post office in Chester, Pennsylvania, where she worked. And Georgia's and her conspirators deposited the checks worth more than $75,000 into various bank accounts and then withdrew the money. And the key is, it's often that same day before the checks were reported stolen. So these are three recent headlines that I just wanted to share, and it's a very real situation. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the fraud risk is higher than ever. And as the slide says, 81% of organizations were targets of payment fraud in 2019. This is the second highest reported fraud since 2009. And the most reported source of fraud is the BEC, which is the business email compromise. So what do we do? To combat the rise in payments fraud, nearly 60% of organizations have a fraud policy in place, and financial leaders at 80% of organizations are educating and training employees on this BEC, the business email compromise I just mentioned, so that they can detect a fraud attack. Okay, back to you, John, for our next poll question.
Sorry, I may have been on mute there. Again, what is the biggest risk to your business? Have several options there, business or nonprofit organization, some of which Matthew just described. We'll take a minute there.
And it's okay if you don't know. That's what we're here for.
All right, let's see what kind of results we got here. Phishing, 50%, definitely the highest response among our viewers today. Matthew, back to you.
Yep, next slide, please. So continuing this conversation, there's three real life examples of recent corporations who've had attacks. The first one is Exum Corporation. It's an international money transfer organization based in California. I'm sure you've heard of them. They reported an incident where spoofed emails were sent to the company's finance department. And then the results of this were the transfer of just under $31 million in corporate cash to fraudulent overseas accounts. So the transfer of $31 million in cash to fraudulent overseas accounts. The CFO resigned, and the company's audit committee authorized an independent investigation by outside advisors. The company has implemented additional internal procedures, and federal law enforcement authorities are actively pursuing a multi-agency criminal investigation. So this is serious business. Because of this, the company's stock dipped by 14%, or approximately $31 million. The second example is from a company called Ubiquity, and they are a wireless networking technology company based in San Jose. The company reported an attack targeting company finances that involved both employee and executive impersonation. So this attack, initiated by the company subsidiary in Hong Kong, resulted in the transfer of $46.7 million to a third-party bank account belonged to the attackers. So once alerted, the company recovered 8.1 million of the total amount transferred. Also, an additional 6.8 million is expected to be recovered in due time. It is still in the process of recovering the remaining sum of the 31.8 million, and they are cooperating fully with both the US federal and overseas law enforcement authorities. So again, serious business. You don't want to be in a pickle, and Jeff's going to get into some more details here how you can avoid this. And then the third and final example, the toy maker Mattel, based here in the States, they had a recent attack also. This fraud was the result of a very sophisticated phishing email directed to an unnamed finance executive who was able to approve large cash transfers. I think the phishing and the emails impersonating people, this is something we all have to be extremely wary of. The email was apparently written by the new CEO, Christopher Sinclair. The cyber attackers conducted thorough research. They're super sophisticated. And this thorough research beforehand on the senior Mattel company staff members. And as a result, this enabled them to understand the corporate hierarchy and also payment patterns. So because of the sophisticated nature of these cyber attackers, they were able to lure over $3 million from Mattel to a bank of Wenzhou in China. So Mattel contacted the FBI as well as the bank in China, and as a result, the funds were subsequently returned. Apparently, this bank in this Chinese region is infamous for funneling cash stolen from CEO phishing scams. So because of the thorough investigation conducted, Mattel was able to track down a dozen more BEC, the business email compromise scams, that were launched at the company after this attack. So they became more aware and they were able to prevent further attacks. So serious business. I'm going to turn it back to John, and we'll move on. And Jeff's going to be able to get into some more details about what you guys can do. John?
Yeah, certainly. I'll note that, again, if you have any questions, members of the audience, you can click on our Q&A function at the bottom. I'm particularly interested in this part myself. I think, we've all seen the, death of someone in Nigeria, and you get some kind of inheritance. But over the last year, actually, at our company, I've gotten emails purportedly from my boss with his name and something, very authentic seeming.
Exactly.
Is that something that there is really an uptick in this more sophisticated kind of attack? And is there more success with these kinds of schemes?
Jeff, you want to take that?
And if you want to unmute yourself, Jeff.
Yes, so that definitely is one thing that there is an uptick definitely in that area. The sophistication over time has gotten a lot better. Typically, you could almost just look at an email before and tell that it was coming from an anomalous location, suspicious threat actor, etc. But yeah, they've gotten all the way to the point of, in some cases, creating an email account inside of the company's email infrastructure or set of accounts, and people wouldn't even know that was occurring, and it looked like it was coming right from that same person.
Yeah, and I think culturally though, we're so reliant on email. We all do so much business via email that I think we can get lazy and we can get a little bit complacent, and that's what the fraudsters are hoping to capitalize on. So we all just have to know what the signs are and just be aware.
Yep.
And then what is the risk there? If you hit reply, does that allow them somehow to get their way into your system and access other, or what's the risk?
Yeah, so really it turns into more of just a social engineering attack where they're just trying to play off of an individual's, typically it's either there, as Matt described, there's a sophistication in how they understand your process. So they typically are looking for a soft spot or a soft area in either two areas, either people or process. I'll talk about that in the next couple of slides, but it typically is they understand a flow of how your business process works, and then they look for those soft spots.
Great. Back to you then, Jeff.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Thanks for handing this over. I want to kind of go through, we'll call them 4 layers, but they're really 4 areas across a payment ecosystem. So as just kind of said with the fraudsters, they look for soft spots in people and process, and in this case, the layers of protection just need to span the entire gamut of your payment ecosystem. So let's start with the next slide. And the 4 areas in this case, I'm going to start with protecting the payment. We're going to talk then move into securing the operations. The third part is much more technical. That is really when you think of cyber, that is fortifying your network. And then lastly, what we call locking down and compliance. That really turns into more of a way of determining how good you are, how good are your processes, all those things about protecting your payments, securing your operations, fortifying your network. You, in this case, will have a way of determining your compliance in some areas. So, all right, next slide. So in the first area of protecting your payment, in this case, in most cases with check, in this particular case, if you are still using checks, positive pay is a way to protect checks. When you are generating checks on a daily basis and those check numbers are generated with an amount, this positive pay capability allows you to send those check numbers and payments amounts and who they're paid to up to your bank. And in this case, it allows you to, if a check attempts to get cashed and it's not in those files of understanding that you've provided to your bank, they pop those up, they escalate those to you, and those turn into, more than likely, they're attempting to stop a fraudulent check in this case. So by having positive pay in place, that can block that. For the case of ACH payments, that ultimately gets you away from checks, so therefore you don't deal with all those same constructs of fraud in a check mechanism. So in this case, you move to an ACH payment capability. In this case, also, the likelihood of fraud, because it is ACH, but I will tell you, likelihood of fraud reduces, but there are other ways you have to protect your ACH payment. In this case, when someone sets up an ACH payment, you want to make sure you are performing, in this case, procedures around identity proofing. You want to make sure that you are about ready to pay and set up this ACH for the right party that you are expected to be doing business with. So in this case, on top of if checks aren't the way, if ACH isn't the way, virtual cards, this turns into allowing to do one-time use cards. And in this case, you don't have to have an ongoing credit line. If you're using like a P card as an example, in this case, you can work through a Visa virtual debit card and get a certain amount on each card in this case. So in wrapping all this up, protecting the payment really turns into moving from check, which is the highest area of fraud, over into ACH or virtual card, and ensuring that you have procedures in place that you can definitely understand who you are paying. Next slide.
And Jeff, could I jump in with an audience question?
Sure, yeah.
Yes, from Anna Chen. Recently, copious company checks were directly sent to individuals using my employer's checks. She doesn't say so, but apparently, unauthorized in an unauthorized way. We closed the account. However, we had to have it available for accounting purposes. What else can my organization do?
So in this case, if it's the positive pay, in that case would have picked up on those checks. It wouldn't have cashed those checks. It would have brought those back to you. You then, in that case, the account, I'm not sure if I'm following from the standpoint of if I have to keep that account open for accounting purposes, or the only other thing you can do is work with your bank to determine whether they were able to figure out who the perpetrator was. But other than that, I'm not exactly following the question, but positive pay in this case turns into a way of protecting those checks.
And one other quick clarification question from the audience. You mentioned a P card. What is that?
A purchase card. So a lot of times businesses will hold a purchase card. So if you're going to do, example, I'm going to buy some goods from Amazon or Staples or some online retailer. A lot of times you'll use a P card or a subscription to some software or subscription to a cloud solution. A lot of times companies will have a P card available, and that P card usually has it's almost like a regular spend card. It's got a $10,000 limit. I can charge up to 10K on it. What that ends up doing is it allows, if that card ever gets taken or compromised, that card number, someone can, at that point, be able to put charges on that card. It is, because of the national networks of Visa, et cetera, and MasterCard, there is some fraud prevention or fraud protection there. But if you can, in this case, are making multiple payments, not just these one or two type of payments for particular small goods. If you're going to be making many payments, this allows you to really reduce the possible risk of those cards. But P card is a spend card, we'll call it.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, second area, operations, securing the operations. So I like to think of the place in which payments are being made should almost operate as though it's like a clean room. If you think about, you want to make sure that everything around you is trusted, is understood. In this case, securing the environment can be as easy as having a clean desk policy. If you've got sensitive information around, if you've got check stock laying around, in those cases, you want to make sure that you've got things that are really protected in regards to just the basics. That's securing the environment. In the case of fraud detection, this turns into, from an operations perspective, wanting to understand what are the usual habits and the usual frequency of interactions. So example is if someone is brand new to a payment, a new supplier, and they were just set up, and all of a sudden a week later they say, well, we've changed our bank account. That's atypical. That's not something, if I just started doing business with you a week ago and all of a sudden your bank changed, or, oh, I'm no longer, our controller's no longer here after a week, it's now this person over here. That's where that whole idea of that phishing and business email compromise, that's where that fraud detection starts to come in place. You almost have to put up I'll call them your spidey antennas to determine, is this normal part of our flow, or is this a little bit, is things happening too quickly and they shouldn't be? We used to pay you once a year. Why are we now paying you 5 times a year? So that's kind of a payment acceleration. In the case of training, you want to make sure that everyone in the organization understands what a business email compromise is. We want to really get everyone very aware and understanding how to be trained and how to understand what are these particular different mechanisms or different tactics that fraudsters can take in order to game your system, game your business process in order to get to the money in this case. So it really becomes very important to know that all your workers understand how these things work. And lastly, in procedures, this turns into things such as having multiple approvals. And this is not even, in this case, not even just for fraudsters, but as part of normal typical financial controllership. You want to make sure that you have certain sign-off levels, approval hierarchies, dual approval on certain levels of payments. You don't want to just have one person be able to writing checks for $1 million or making payments for $1 million. You want to make sure that that's going through some level of hierarchy and procedure in this case. Okay, next slide. This part here, this is a little bit closer to where the space that I play in, from the particular case of cyber and information security. But in this case, this talks about really the basic blocking and tackling of your technology. All those so far I've talked about are a little bit more procedural, human-led. In this case, these turn into being a little bit more what I call technical controllership or technical controls. In this case, endpoint protection, things such as having trusted and known software running on your machine. Patch software. Hey, Microsoft just put out a big Patch Tuesday, and they had some security fixes that were big. We want to make sure that we are patching our systems for that. In the case of just having antivirus, that's yet another one. Antivirus, in fact, Microsoft's antivirus has come a long way. It's gotten a lot better. We use it here as one of our 2 layers of defense on our endpoints. And we're finding that, that it's catching more than it could before. Email defenses, in this case, there's ways for understanding and blocking and interrogating and reviewing and analyzing the email that does come at you. So if you're using Office 365 or Google Gmail, the Google G Suite, some of those bigger platforms of email, those typically already have many of those capabilities built in. There are some more advanced capabilities. Example, we use a product that actually detects and looks for those business email compromise emails types, those really sophisticated phishing attacks. We have those type of controls as well that aren't just doing that basic blocking and tackling, but really are analyzing the email. Vulnerability management, this turns into a little bit of, if you have servers, if you have your ERP system, you want to make sure that your ERP system is properly configured to make sure that it's safe in its operation, that it can't be hacked. This turns into both endpoints, this turns into your ERP, this turns into servers, your network, etc. So that's really vulnerability management to determine that your software is safe and your technology implementation is safe. And then lastly, threat protection. This turns into really understanding what's occurring in your environment. Did I have a breach? Did I, in my network, has a bad actor or a threat actor gotten into my network and I just don't know it and haven't protected and understood it? This talks about understanding behavior detection through logging and log analytics. It's a little bit more complicated, but there's in some cases some easy tools that you can use that will be able to help you along in understanding what threats might be there. That's it. Next question. Next one. And lastly, from compliance, this one is really, it lets you get an understanding of how good you are. In this case, NACHA, PCI, SOC 2, these are all well-known. I'll say for NACHA, it's more ACH audit. As part of the NACHA operating rules, there is a requirement that your ACH, if you are doing ACHs, that you are audited upon how you are presenting and building up your ACH transactions into the payment network. For PCI, if you're dealing with card information, that's where there's a PCI DSS or data security standard that is I'll call it a baseline or a benchmark of security maturity in your system and in your processes. And then in SOC 2, that's really a service organization controls assessment, and that really determines how good are you in, example, processing integrity, confidentiality of information, integrity of information. So it's technical controls, it's HR controls, onboarding controls, etc. So all these things really are to really test and determine how good are you in your maturity of an organization from those particular areas I described. And then lastly, OFAC list. This one really is where you want to ensure that you are paying the right, a legal, in this case, a legal entity, and not an illegal entity. So you're not paying terrorists, you're not paying drug cartels, etc. So the OFAC list is a Treasury owned and operated list that you can subscribe to, and will let you know that if you have a company you're about ready to pay, you can check that entity against that list to determine if they're on a known subject list. Okay, at that point, I'm happy to move on to the next slide. Thanks so much.
Yeah, actually, Jeff, we'll go to a poll question, but I had a couple of follow-up questions for you as well. Are you 100% confident your payments are protected? As we let those answers come in, I was wondering if we could revisit the training question. I've heard cybersecurity experts say in recent years during some other discussions we've had, you can have all the systems in place, you can have the right protections and everything, but really it's the potential for human error, human vulnerability that's like, you're never going to completely be able to protect against that. Is this one of the biggest issues, one of the biggest concerns in your view? And then could you elaborate on that a little bit more broadly?
Yeah, so the as I mentioned a little bit before, social engineering, that is where the game is now. I'll say in the olden days, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, it used to be really about cyber. It used to be, I'm going to attack into a company, I'm going to use malware. Malware's still being used, yes, but it's not really the vector anymore. It is truly getting into, if a company, or if in this case the bad guys know where the money is, they're going to find some easy ways to go after soft targets to determine how to get at those dollars. But yeah, that's more social engineering than anything. Right.
We're seeing the results of our poll. 36% say, about 1/3 say yes, they are confident in the safety of their payments. 64, nearly 2/3 say no. So there's some real concern out there. Just two other quick follow-up questions for you, Jeff. Again, broadly, big picture, my vague sense of things is like it's this never-ending game of whack-a-mole. The people out there trying to get into your systems are always coming up with new and more innovative ways to try to crack your system, and it's always like this game of catch up. You fix this thing, you gotta figure out the next thing. Is that accurate? Could you talk about that a little bit?
There is there can be a little bit of that, but you end up, if you can determine that you have put the right controls in your procedures, in this case procedures, because ultimately if you just followed standard operating procedures and did a little bit of, describe as threat modeling, but I think if you just followed your procedure straight away, you'd be in the clear in understanding where that would be. So that's, I'm not sure if I got you there.
No, that makes sense. And then just one, I guess, kind of detailed thing. Personally, my own company, we seem to have a pretty strict kind of safety net. You know, a lot of potential spam emails don't come through. They go to the spam folder. I've sometimes felt like it catches too much, right? Like there's an important email, I need to get it today, and like I don't forget to check my spam folder. And is that kind of a trade-off that you have to consider, or should I just be, checking my spam folder several times a day?
Yeah, that turns into a bit of that. If it is, so I know with spam folders, you can, if it is an entity that you trust, a subject that you trust that is coming, or the person is coming from, if you can actually add them to your contacts, and then once they're added to your contact, then they no longer fall into your spam folder. But yeah, the algorithms they use, sometimes they talk about machine learning and AI and all that, but ultimately those models are there's still little ticks and hiccups they end up having where it's not 100%. But you can actually, there are ways, depending on the technology you use, you can actually help that along by telling the engine that was right and that wasn't right. I had to release that. So over time, it gets to say, well, I've released that from quarantine. So a lot of times we have quarantine folders. It says, hey, this got caught in the spam filter, the quarantine, the bad email filter. Let's go ahead and release it. And that starts to train that a little bit better.
Right. Probably requires some more active efforts on my part to manage my system. I guess, Matthew, back to you, if you could talk about some practical steps to take.
Yeah, next slide. Yep. Thanks, Jeff. Great information. Clearly a lot smarter than I am, and I'm thankful that you're on our team. So good job. So what we're hoping you take away from today's presentation is the threat of fraud is very, very real. So obviously we don't wish this on anyone. However, statistically, 9 out of 10 of you will realize some form of fraud or security breach within your organization this year. So what I'd say to you guys is, if you're processing payments in-house, forward this PDF, which I'm going to make sure gets sent out later today. Forward this PDF to your operations team and your finance team. And some of the items on the screen right now, there's lists on different subjects, but some of the items listed may not pertain to you. But me and Jeff are pretty sure that there are going to be items on here that do and are not being addressed properly. And sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And that's why, you know, we're experts in this field. I would also like to point out, if you do not have the resources or talent internally to manage all these steps and procedures correctly, there is a simple way to achieve all of this. So what I would say to you is do your research, you know, find a credible third party to process your payments independently from your bank and your card accounts. Next slide, please. And again. So you can secure your payments yourself, or you can use somebody like Paymerang to help. This slide gives you a visual of how kind of Paymerang works and how we do it. And I'm only going to go through it really quickly. We are ERP agnostic. So that means we integrate our solution alongside your existing ERP software, and we integrate it with that. So there's no changes there. So typically there's just 3 simple steps. Obviously it's a little bit more complicated this, but in general terms, you upload a single file in our portal from your ERP. Step 2 is you confirm, create, and fund the batch in our portal. And then step 3 is you mark everything as paid on your end, you're done. So, and that's when we go to work. So in very simple terms, what you are simply wiring us the bulk amount of money for the bills that week. Let's say it's $100,000. We handle all the individual disbursements. So we're going to be, we send out all the payments, all the individual payments. You're just reconciling that bulk amount. And from a processing point of view, we process payments 3 times a day, 10 a.m., 1:30, and 3:30 East Coast time. If things are submitted by 2:30 and funded, then the payment goes the same day. So the key to this is we can pay your vendors the way they want to be paid, and obviously we're going to pay them quickly and securely. And as the slide says, we have 3 options to pay your vendors, and we do all that. So we have ACH, we have the virtual card, and we have check. So you no longer have to do any of that. We're going to do it for you. On the ACH side, the remit is in the body of an email the same day, and funds are deposited the next business day. And on the recon side, we're going to call any rejects within 24 hours. On the virtual card side, I think Jeff mentioned this earlier, we use pre-funded single-use virtual cards, a lot more secure this way. So they're preloaded with the amount of the bill. Instructions and remittance are delivered right away, and 90% settle in 3 days. The 10% who don't settle, you know, we pick up the phone and call them once they're 7 days outstanding. And then the last, if the vendor still wants to be paid via check, we'll do that. Checks have your logo on. They look the same as they do now, except they have our routing and account number on them, not yours. So this is just another example. We're constantly shielding your information from being out in the public sphere. As the presentation suggests, fraud is exploding. So it's just another way to protect your information. The checks are printed and mailed within 24 hours, and they have positive pay included, which Jeff was talking about, positive pay. We do include that in our service. And of course, we contact those who are 14 days outstanding. So the bottom line is, not only do we make all the payments on your behalf quickly and securely, we do all the recon, the follow-up as well, doing all the heavy lifting associated with AP, basically lighten your load, let the experts take care of it and take it off your plate. So yeah, the bottom line is we're going to make sure your payments are secure and are settled. So yeah, you become more secure, more efficient, and profitable. We do the work, and then essentially one of the biggest takeaways from this is, from a Paymerang point of view, is we take on that responsibility and liability of making your payments. It's what we're good at. It's what we do every day. So we can save you time and money, send you quarterly cash rewards, and then you can make a profit by doing less work. But obviously there's many benefits with security and efficiency. So hopefully that just gives you a quick overview of how Paymerang can help. And like I said, I'll make sure the PDF goes out at some point later today. Back to you, John, for our final poll question, I think.
Yes. Would you like to learn more? Yes or no? Okay, let's see what results we got. Okay, let's see. It's, 56% said yes. And actually I had a couple quick questions. Well, I'll just note that if there are any audience questions, please enter those now. I think, Matthew, back to you.
Yeah, go to the next slide. Yeah, that's kind of wraps everything up what I was going to say, but now would be a good time, John, to address any audience questions, or if there's any questions coming in at the last minute, we can certainly address those at this time.
Sure. Nothing there immediately, but I had a couple questions. Just clarifying, you know, someone signs up with Paymerang, and there is some kind of issue, some kind of breach, or you know, funds get lost somewhere. Again, you guys take care of that?
Yeah, we're insured, and Jeff can probably speak to this as well, but you know, we're insured. We take on that liability and responsibility. And it is a partnership. We're going to be doing most of the work, but it is a partnership, and we're certainly going to reduce the risk of fraud. It's not necessarily going to eliminate it, but we can, we know for sure we're going to, because we're experts at what we do, we're going to be able to reduce the chance of fraud and just kind of make everything more secure when it comes to the business payments. So it's more of a peace of mind thing, that whatever you're currently doing, typically we can make things a lot more efficient, a lot more secure.
And we had an audience question, very specific. To what dollar amount are you insured?
Jeff, do you know that?
I do, but I'm at this point, from an NDA perspective, so it's, I'll say it's above 5 mil.
Got it.
Double digits.
And in terms of dollar amounts too, I'm wondering, so a lot of our viewers are, you know, work for nonprofit organizations.
Right.
They're big nonprofits, they're small nonprofits, you know, that's what will get by. Are there kind of different tiers of service? You know, if you're not a big kind of, you know, well-endowed organization that has a lot of money sitting around to, sure.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I'll give you an example. I specialize in nonprofits. I helped a small nonprofit down in Louisiana recently, and their total, well, I say small, their total AP spend for the year was around 4.5 million. And they're considered a small client for us, and we were able to help them out, and they were able to take advantage of the cash quarterly rewards. Some folks, some churches who are, you know, 2 to 3 million for AP spend, we can still help them. They're not big enough to qualify for the rebates, but a lot of these smaller folks just want the work to be taken off their plate. They get the efficiency gains, they get the security gains. They're just super excited for have Paymerang help them and just kind of, like I say, lighten their load. On the flip side, you know, there's Washington DC large nonprofits that I've helped who are considerably larger. Therefore, they've got a lot more to lose. Their rebates are a lot higher because their volume is higher. But we certainly can help smaller nonprofits all the way through to larger ones. Does that help, John?
Yeah, certainly. That's very helpful. Just another broader question. Business clients versus nonprofit clients, is there kind of any noteworthy differences in the services you provide, or is there kind of things that are tailored more for one kind of entity than another?
We certainly don't. I mean, one of the competitive advantages we have is that our service that we provide for our clients and then our clients' vendors is world class. We're still small enough where we can be a bit more intimate with our relationships. So the service that we provide, whether you're a small nonprofit in Louisiana or a gigantic nonprofit in Washington, DC, the service you're going to get is the same. So really the only difference is depending on the size of the volume of your AP is going to determine the size of your quarterly rebates. So folks don't pay a fee to Paymerang. There's no startup fee. There's no maintenance fee. We have a unique business model where we're able to make a small profit on through Visa on the interchange. We share those profits with our clients. So for example, I have a client whose gross rebate is 100,000 for the year. We subtract some fees from that, around 20,000. It's different for every client. So then you get that $80,000, and we split that up into 4 payments. So we send our clients $20,000 every quarter as part of our service. So you not only become more efficient and secure, you can actually turn AP into a profit. So it really is a win-win situation, and it's not too good to be true. It's just the way we do business.
Looks like I don't see any other audience questions. Matthew or Jeff, anything else final to add?
No, thank you for having us, and appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone today. And I'm looking forward to future webinars.
Okay, great. Just a few final notes. Paymerang will have its next webinar coming up on Thursday, October 22nd. Registration is free and can be found on our NYN website, which we'll post in the chat. Also, at our sister publication, City and State, covering New York State, New York City politics and government, we have our Protecting New York Summit coming up in 2 weeks on Thursday, October 15th at 1 p.m. Registration for that is also free and on our website. We'll post that in the chat as well. And that concludes our program. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, John.
Great, thank you.